Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Gio and Joey Show, talking politics, all things politics from a Protestant perspective. Today, we have a special guest, Alissa Baker. She's worked with Nikki Haley, and she's promised to give us some inside scoop. We're going to talk about the future of the GOP and other women's issues and how conservatives should talk about them. Alissa, welcome to the program today.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Awesome. Joey, take it away, buddy.
Yeah, super excited for this. It's always nice on X when you can find someone who you just really align with their politics, especially in this age where the GOP is not always what it once was, but I do still think of the two parties, it's our better hope. So I guess to start things out, why don't you kind of just tell us and tell our audience about what your role was with the Nikki Haley campaign and what your experiences were like on the campaign trail.
Sure, yeah. So I got involved with the Nikki Haley campaign as a volunteer. I've always followed Nikki's career once she got to the governor's mansion in South Carolina. And so I was super excited when she decided to get into the race for president. So I just went to her website and signed up and said, throw me in, coach, I'll help. And got on her mailing list and saw that they were looking for help in Virginia, where I live, to help get Nikki on the ballot. And one of the things that really jumped out at me there was, I was really looking to get back and involved because I wanted people to have a choice, especially in the primaries where, this is where we get to make our choice. And so I worked with the group here in Virginia to help do ballot access. And if you're not familiar with that process, you basically go around, and in Virginia, it's a very manual process. You go door to door and you go everywhere you can to get people to sign petitions to get Nikki on the ballot. And so through that, I got to meet the lady who ran the Women for Nikki group here in Virginia. And that just got me involved with the greatest group ever, which is the Women for Nikki. And through that, I was able to volunteer to go to Iowa and to South Carolina and get more and more involved with Nikkis Campaign. And so made the greatest group of friends and got to do so many things. And it opened up so many doors for me in terms of, just broadening my horizons. I work in communications in my day job, so I was able to sharpen my communication skills, but also really get to know Nikki and to really get to know who she is as a person and as a leader, and as a Republican. And one of the things, I had found is that I was really kind of drifting away from the Republican Party, and from women's issues in the Republican Party. Because I think one of the things we find is that as women, we are kind of left out of women's issues in general, because women's issues tend to be more toward the Democratic side. And so it was nice to have this community of women that were talking about the issues that matter to Republican women. And Nikki does a great job on that. And so it was exciting to be getting involved in Republican politics again, to not be, Republican wasn't a bad word anymore, to be a conservative again. All these things were reawakening in me. And that was a really exciting thing to just see all of that come back to life. And so I would say, being part of that team and being part of that just re-energized so much in me. And here I am, the campaign ended and that was sad. And then all of a sudden new things opened up for me through that. And here I am sitting on a podcast on Labor Day, talking to you and promising to share stories from the road. So let's dive in.
For sure. And we'll definitely want to get in some of those stories. One thing that kind of prompted a question here that you said at the beginning, right, is that you actually were invested in Nikki Haley as a candidate. And as we've seen in the weeks since, unfortunately, from my vantage point, since she dropped out, there's been a kind of a split. And I think I want to get your opinion on that split. Kind of the Nikki Haley voters, or the Haley voters for Harris, versus the Haley voters for conservatism. Like, what do you think kind of defines that split?
It's interesting. That's a question. Oh boy. When Nikki left the race, she issued a challenge to Donald Trump to reach out to her voters. But she also left us as her voters to make some choices for ourselves. And she trusts our voters. And for a while, I really thought she would maybe just not weigh in. And then she went to Hudson and she made the announcement that she had chosen for herself that she would vote for Donald Trump. And at that point, I was like, okay, that's okay. She let us know her thoughts process and her reasoning and all that. And that was her vote. And she should be able to do that. And she had, right around that time, had also met with her donors and people that had supported her in the campaign. And she said, vote your conscience. And again, trusting her voters that they would do exactly that. And some time had transpired, and then the RNC happened, and she came out and fully endorsed. And she made a really good case at that time for why she was making that endorsement. And so I feel like she has stepped us through this process all along and trusted us. And she continues to make her case all along that these are my reasons. These are why I think this is why you can go with this decision. I love that she says it's okay not to agree 100%. And, we're not looking for a soulmate here.
Yeah.
I don't agree with him all the time. Now, having said that, she knows that not everybody's going to come on this journey with her. And we see that. And I think that there are people that have made that choice, that they're going to go a different direction. And you see that in the Haley voters for Harris. And then you see other people that are saying, I'm Haley voters against Harris. We see this split online. And you have people that are going to write in Haley, and you have people that are just going to leave the top of that ticket blank. It's going to depend, right? It's going to depend on where you live. Do you live in a state that is going to be blue and it doesn't matter what you vote? I think about John Bolton, who talks about, I'm going to write in Dick Cheney because it doesn't matter. My vote isn't going to make a difference what I write in. I live in Virginia. I was very comfortable in writing in Nikki because Virginia was not in play. Virginia is in play right now. So my little comfort zone of writing in Nikki shifted away and eroded very quickly under my feet. And now I have to make a decision. And so, there I sit. We're all going to have to make a decision. And we're all going to have to make choices. And so I sat back and said to myself, okay, well, I'm going to look at what Nikki said. Who do I agree with more than not? Now, having said all that, we have watched this race change time and time again. And it's Labor Day, and our low information voters are now going to start tuning in. I think the race is going to change again. I don't know what that's going to be. And maybe we're going to have an October surprise, and that might change again. So if the race were today, I know what I would do. But it could change. And so the race isn't today. So I'm going to keep watching what happens, and we'll see what happens. I think, people would just have to vote their conscience. They're going to have to do what they think is right. I think the one thing I will say to everyone out there is that the Nikki Haley campaign was never a never Trump movement. I think some people did come along because they saw her as a never Trump campaign option or an anti-Trump option, and that's fine. If that's what you saw in her, that's fine. That's not who she was, and that's not what her campaign was about. If you saw in the primaries, it took her a long time to challenge Trump, to speak out against him. It wasn't until it really came down to a two-person race that she really started scrapping with him. And that's just because that's who her opponent was. Mm-hmm. And then when the race ended and it was time to come back together because the primary season was over, then she came back together. So I think that was pretty telling. So, vote your conscience and, y'all have to do what's right. Nikki trusts each of us to make our own decisions.
And I love that because I think liberty of conscience is not stressed enough in today's politics. And so it becomes so black and white that people start losing friendships over it. And it's not needed, which is why we need to bring back those principles. And some of those principles are what we try to advocate here in the Gio and Joey Show. Putting on your prognostic, I'm butchering the word here. I'll forget the word. You know what I'm trying to say. Who do you think wins in the end? And is it a close race or a blowout either way?
I think it's going to be a very close race. I think that if you look at the pollsters that are not either campaigns pollsters, but you look at those that are really looking at the races very closely, they're predicting a close race. I'm seeing predictions now that are saying that there aren't that many undecided voters left. So I'm curious about that. I want to dig into that some more as just someone who's intellectually curious by my nature. To wonder about that, I do think that the RFK Jr. situation and him, removing himself from key battleground states takes those third-party voters and what that does to the equation. I know he has some legal battles to fight on some of those states that don't want to remove him from the ballot. But I do think that does kind of shift the balance a bit. But I do think it's going to be close. I feel like that. Now, my prediction on who will win, I don't know yet.
Yeah, okay.
Talk to me in October.
Yes, and maybe we'll have you back on. Yeah, it's interesting because there are moments where I think there's no way Trump loses, and then there are moments that I think he's his own worst enemy, and he's going to give her enough openings for her to take it. But I don't want to see... that's where my faith comes in. I just trust in the Lord. Whatever happens, happens. But, some of the things are disturbing, right? With the border and the lack of women's rights in that particular party. So that being said, how does the GOP make a better case to include women? As you mentioned, it wasn't until you got involved with the Nikki Haley campaign that you felt, yes, there is a place for women in the GOP. How can the GOP make a better case for women?
I see some really incredible women, especially in the House races, as well as elected women in the House that are doing some incredible things, and in the Senate as well. And so I think they need to be out there more, front and center. And I just think that there isn't enough emphasis on them right now. And I would love to see more of them. I would love to see Nikki out on the campaign trail. I was actually really just excited when I heard that, and I think it was one of the ABC embeds on Vance's plane actually reported on X, because that's where I get all my news these days. She said that Vance said that Nikki Haley was welcome on his plane. And I was like, do it, bring her on the plane. Get Nikki out there, get her talking. I mean, no one tells the story better than Nikki. I would love to see that happen. But there are just some really great women out there. I know at the RNC, there was a really great leadership breakfast. I believe it was Elise Stefanik that was chairing it. But I know that there was an amazing group of women. Winning for Women is a really great political action committee that supports women running for office and that are working with them. that were part of that breakfast, and they are just really championing women in the running for office and being more involved. But there's a million other groups, well, not a million, but there are other groups out there that are doing it, and they're really talking about the issues that women care about. And let me be clear, it's not a monolith, but Republican women are concerned about kitchen table issues. We're worried about our families. We're worried about security. We're worried about the affordability issues. And these are issues that men are worried about too. Let me be clear. Every time you hear women's issues, you immediately go to abortion.
Yeah.
That's not the only issue. We do care about that. Let's be clear. We care about that. We care about declining birth rates in this country. But we also care about the affordability crisis that we're having. We care about national security. We want to keep our kids safe. We also care about the fact that our kids are falling behind in school. We're worried about the fact that, what's happening in our schools. Our kids can't read, and that they're enforcing gender pronouns on them. I want them to be able to read those gender pronouns before you can tell them. I mean, they can talk about all kinds of diverse families. That's great. I want them to be able to read those words so that they can understand those families. But these are the things that we're worried about, and so we need those women that are out there telling that story. These are the things we care about. And so the fellas are great. We love them. But women can tell these stories from a different viewpoint. And we want the women to get out there and tell them for us as well. And I just think more surrogates and I just don't understand. I think we're seeing it a little bit, but there's some interesting surrogates. I mean, we're seeing Tulsi Gabbard out there a bit. She's an interesting one. She's not your traditional Republican surrogate.
Yeah, but what's interesting with her is, to me, what's interesting with her is what they did to her. I mean, why did they place her on a terrorist watch list? I know that came from a whistleblower, and so it's legit. Well, we tend to think it's legit, and she thinks it is, and people have been asking. That's scary. That's the type of stuff that scares me, because as I mentioned behind the scenes, I try to stay party politics neutral, but I do talk to issues, and the censorship and the border and the erasing of the distinction of women. Those are things that concern me primarily as a man of faith. And also I have 3 daughters.
Yeah.
I live in a world where I'm a proud girl dad. But I want to protect the world they're growing up.
Yes.
For them primarily. And so I understand. I try to be more empathetic to women's issues, where perhaps before marriage and before having daughters, I would just leave it alone. But I'm more involved now, and it's important to me.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think I try to be very empathetic to all people. But I also feel very strongly as a woman who's, we've fought hard in the workplace, and we fought hard to get to where we are. And so to feel like we're, I hate to say it, but erasing us, I don't want to be a birth parent. I'm a mother.
Yes.
I don't want, there was something recently and it just, it was just a little strange. I mean, they wanted to talk about issues in the workplace around, different issues that affect women, but they wanted to neutralize the language. And I was just very concerned about that. It's like, great, you want to have these discussions about these issues that affect women. That's great, but don't neutralize the language. And by neutralizing the language, you're invalidating the woman's journey. Embrace it. I'm all for inclusivity, but don't do it at the expense of what the woman's experience is. Let's more is more. I mean, I guess I was just brought up at a time of free to be you and me. Now I'm really showing my age, but we were embracing all, not one at the expense of another. And so I don't know when that happened, when we exchanged that view for something else, but yeah, I feel pretty strongly that we need to make sure that we don't forget that women have fought a long, hard battle to get to where we are. So to completely then turn around and do a 180 on that, just that, that is a problem. We
Yes.
can't forget that struggle and, to get to this place.
I forgot the person who used to say it, but it was one of these financial gurus, not Dave Ramsey. He used to say, if both of you are the same, then one of you is not needed. And I think we need to celebrate the differences between a man and a woman. And that's the way God made them. And that's the way that the world works, not only biologically, but emotionally. My daughters need a father in their lives, and they also need a mother. Because if it was just me, I'd be running a little military shop here. But, get up at 6, eat breakfast by 8, in school by 9. But obviously, the world is blurring that distinction. How does the GOP make a case for traditional values without necessarily seeming like old-fashioned in a negative sense? Because old-fashioned can be good in a positive sense, but not to seem outdated.
I think it's about additive. I think, and this is where, I think I always say we're better when we're bigger. I always like to talk about the big tents, and this is where I think the GOP is we're at loggerheads right now, whether it's about the one thing that's, and this kind of gets back to what you were asking, Joey, about this whole Haley voters for Harris versus Haley voters against Harris, or what's the future of the GOP, or we're all looking to like. It's this battle for control. It's this battle for who's going to win, who's going to come out on top. You know what? We need to be a more is more. And I think, yes, it's important that we get back to our core values, but our core values can't be at the exclusion of one versus the other. We have grown, we have evolved. And so it's important that we anchor in those traditional values and those traditional principles. But I think that we also have to recognize that there are new people that have joined us, and that some of them, in the same way that we're a melting pot, and so that's those people bring traditions with them that make us better and stronger. And as long as they respect our values and our traditions, we can incorporate and assimilate, in the same way that we've assimilated as a country. You know what I mean? It's that it's not that one negates the other. And as long as there's a respect, I don't want to get to a place where we're, and X is a great place of just nastiness and toxic soup. We can't be the toxic soup, but we can be a big tent. And so I think that it's important to say that we will respect each other and to definitely include each other. But again, that core focusing and getting back to that the basics need to be at that foundation and that root.
One thing that I think, and obviously as a Christian stuff, I do believe in more traditional values and stuff. One thing that I think sometimes the right can make a mistake is idolizing, say, a particular period of time as this is what the standard is, versus like, I think a message that actually could be winning, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, but it's like a message of, hey, as a society, we're going to make sure that stay-at-home mothers are just as elevated, right? Like they're not denigrated, but we're also not going to denigrate if a woman wants to make the choice to have a career or these other things, right? In other words, we can support both things, right? So traditional values doesn't have to be, all the women just back in the kitchen or whatever. Like, no, in a modern society, right? Proverbs 31, right, is this woman is like running a business and like all that stuff, right? Or the other, just kind of a humorous anecdote I saw on social media. It's like somebody said, a biblical woman is, whatever these things. It's like, yeah, or a biblical woman is driving a tent spike through a tyrant's head, right? I believe in Judges, right? So,
Yes.
like, in other words, there can be an expansive view that recognizes that people are going to make different choices. And I think maybe if that was the message, more people would not wince when start talking about traditional values. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. I mean, as a woman, as a working woman, and a working mom, I have lived through the mommy wars. We are all working mothers, whether you are
get paid or not.
whether you are paid or not, whether you work in the home or out of the home, we all work. I don't care how you do it. We work hard. And for whatever reason, some of us have to go outside the home to work, and some of us work in the home, and it doesn't matter. We all love our children. We all love our families the same. And I don't judge anyone for whatever road they have to go, and whatever they choose. All of our choices are valid. And so I agree with you. I think that we have to look at it and just say we all have to manage our families the way we see fit. They're all right. And I think we can't stand in judgment of each other. I mean, that's what the biggest problem is that if we all stand in judgment of each other, we're all just going to stay divided. If I always look at it this way, assume best intent. We're a lot better off if we assume best intent with each other. And then we can go from there. And of course, until someone proves you otherwise. Now, when someone shows you who they are, believe them. But if you can assume best intent with someone and know that people are trying their best, then we're always in a better place.
And if we could send a message, I think he's starting to get it. But if we could send a message to J.D. Vance, let's not sell a popular policy like child tax credits as an attack on single women, right? Like,
yes,
a policy that literally almost everybody agrees on, and then make it as no. But
so as a communications person, I would love to take on JD Vance as a project. JD, if you're listening, I'm available. I think he is getting a lot more message discipline, so I will give him credit where credit is due. I think that a lot of times when people are starting out, they don't always do the best job with message discipline. I think he's getting better. He has definitely said things that have put his foot right into his mouth.
But I think that's the problem with Trump as well. If Trump was the what I call a smooth criminal, the Michael Jackson song, like Clinton was, or even Obama, give him credit for that. I mean, this would be a blowout. But he's his own worst enemy.
Yeah.
And that's what's frustrating with him and his campaign. And I think that's what turns a lot of people off.
And part of the problem is that Trump is who he is, and so it's hard to tell him not to do things. I watched this weekend, I think it was yesterday, Governor Kemp and Mike Pompeo had gone and done an event, and I said, oh, great. We've got some adults in the room. And if only Trump could not be Trump and do his Trumpy thing, this would be great because, he could stay focused and on, some discipline. That would be fantastic. And I get that there's times where you just have to let Trump be Trump. But, if he could kind of bring it in, that would be great. It's hard. He can be a flawed candidate. And so I know, again, putting my comms hat on, sometimes it's hard to defend him from that perspective because he can really go off message. On the flip side, I see these moments of, especially the more human side. I mean, you see him when he interacts, and I've taken a lot of heat on X this weekend in particular because I one of the things I'm very passionate about is military families. And it's something I volunteer with in my spare time. And he's been very supportive of the families, the Gold Star families from Abbey Gate. And I know that, the situation in Arlington was a very hot button issue. He's given a lot of time to them. And, when you see him and how he interacts with people, not on the stage, when he gets on the stage and he's riffing and he's doing his thing, it gets a little crazy. Okay. Hannibal Lecter aside and sharks aside and all those other things. But when he's doing just interacting with people and you see that human side come out, you're like, wait a second, this is not the same crazy guy. And those are those moments, and you think there's something here, and that's like, when I see that, I'm like, okay, this is you need to see more of this guy. This is the guy you need to see. This is the human guy. When I see him with his grandchildren at the RNC, I'm like, this is the guy that they need to show more of. Less of the Hannibal Lecter on the stage talk and more of that stuff. And more message discipline, please. The comms person in me wants more message discipline.
When Ben Shapiro, I like the way he puts it. He says that if Trump would speak the way he governed, right? More people were satisfied with the way he governed than the way he goes off message. Then he'd be a superior candidate. But that's the flaw. I guess that's what makes him great to people, and that's what makes him a flawed candidate. Speaking of, though, we promised people some inside scoop on the Haley campaign. Before we go into those inside scoops, how did you end up in Iowa with her? I know you volunteered in Virginia, but some volunteers just stay locally in their state. How'd you end up going all the way to Iowa?
So the Iowa caucuses is a big undertaking, and so they needed a lot of volunteers to come out to Iowa, and I've always been fascinated by the Iowa caucuses. I mean, just what an incredible process. And so when the all call came out and said, anybody interested in coming out, I just said, put me in, coach. I would love to go try it out. And so I signed up to go. Little did I know that it would be the coldest Iowa caucuses on record, that a blizzard would hit, and then a polar vortex, and then it would take me 2 days to get there, and many canceled flights, and a ping pong trip across the country to get there, and a very strange flight in, but I did eventually get there, and a very harrowing drive in a blizzard to finally get to my destination. But I did volunteer to go, and it was probably the most incredible experience of my life to be a caucus captain for Nikki Haley in Iowa.
And what exactly does that entail for those listening? A caucus captain?
Yeah, so a caucus captain is someone who goes to a caucus site and actually speaks on behalf of the candidate. And so on caucus day, you go to your caucus location, and all the people that are in that caucus, all the locals that come to that caucus site will come, and then they will say, is anyone here to speak for fill in the blank candidate? So is anyone here to speak for Nikki Haley? And then you stand up and you give your pitch for the candidate. And so ideally you would want local people to speak, but caucuses being what they are, you don't always have local people. So I got up and I gave my impassioned speech on why Nikki Haley was the best person. And there were others in the room. There was someone there for DeSantis, and there was someone there for another candidate who I don't even remember who he was. He was somebody I had never heard of before. And he was a self-funded candidate who didn't make it very far. And then everybody got a slip of paper, and then they threw their slips of paper they wrote the names on them and then threw them in the hat. And then we counted them out, and that was it. That was the whole experience of the Iowa caucus. And there were rooms all over Iowa where that was happening. So that was pretty cool. But it was minus 20 degrees.
Mercy. Oh,
At
I'm
one
living
point.
I'm living in Texas now. I don't know if I could handle that anymore. I did grow up in the Northeast, but minus 20? Sheesh.
Yeah, it was crazy. My rental car tires deflated to the point where I was driving on them, and I had warnings that said, "Do do not drive on these tires," and it was like,
Yeah.
I have to get to my destination. But yeah.
Was it easier getting out than getting in eventually?
Um, it was actually, well, sort of. I got out of Iowa. I made it to Chicago, and then I couldn't get past Chicago. My flights were canceled, but yeah. But yeah, actually getting into Iowa was fun. I was on a plane. I was standby on a plane packed with journalists. So I knew my plane was going to get there because Dana Bash and Juan Williams and a number of other high-profile journalists were on that plane. So I was convinced that I was absolutely going to get there. I was in the back with all the foreign journalists. So,
Okay.
like ITV and all the other networks from all over the world were sitting in the back with me. But I knew we were getting off the ground because CNN and Fox News were getting there. There was no way they weren't going to go.
So, what's the big reveal? What inside scoop can you share with us?
What can I share with you? Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think what's very interesting. I think what was super interesting about just being on the campaign trail was it is super interesting. Like, you just don't realize how it's not glamorous in any way.
No, I can't imagine it is.
You just go. I mean, we had an event in Iowa in a barbecue restaurant in the back room. And I'll never forget, we walked in the front door, and we were the Women for Nikki, our little group. And I walked in the barbecue restaurant. We were a sight. We were wearing pink feather boas and Nikki Haley shirts and hats, and we were a sight to see. And everybody sort of turned and looked at us like, what just happened? And there is Asa Hutchinson doing media, because there is media everywhere. I mean, the campaign, it's just coming into town. Asa Hutchinson looked like he had no idea what just occurred, and he was just stunned. And we walked our way to the back room, and all of a sudden, reporters and photographers just swarmed us because we were a sight to see. And after that, we became sort of this traveling spectacle of the Nikki Haley women, who then became a interesting talking point. There's a guy in Texas who basically decided to make us, some sort of a thing. He called us, a gaggle of Karens, and just decided to tweet some nasty things about us. And then we, suddenly became targets that, some not so nice people started showing up at events and looking for the Karens that they could harass and that kind of thing. But on the flip side, we were very proud that we made the cover of Le Monde in Paris with
Nice.
our picture. And, so the Women for Nikki became a nice big thing with our pink feather boas. And we were very loud and vocal. And we were a force to be reckoned with. And it became a signature of the Nikki Haley campaign, I would say. So we were very proud of it.
Go ahead, Joey.
Yeah, so I love that, and I love how, because one of the perceptions that I think some people unfairly tried to paint of Nikki Haley is that, well, she was the donor's choice, or she was the establishment pick, or whatever. And yet, what I saw from her campaign, it was very much a grassroots campaign, right? Volunteers like yourself, and at the end of the day, in that, I memean, as much as we had a primary, like she was very much talking about like what you were talking about before, the kitchen table issues. She very much was focused on no, like we have to actually stop the Biden-Harris economic agenda and the culture of weakness on the foreign policy stage and all these things. She was bringing it very much back to the issues in a campaign that, in my opinion, right, was very much focused on like what you were saying, like let's find a way to label this group of supporters, the Karens or whatever. It was very much like character assassination type campaign. And Nikki, for the most part, wasn't playing that game. And so I guess maybe she was just too good for American politics. I don't know. But I hope that she considers coming back in 4 years, and we'll see what happens.
We were definitely misunderstood. I felt like that the whole time.
How so?
The media misunderstood us in a lot of ways. I will never forget the night in Charleston when we were at it was election night. It was the primary election in Charleston, and the media was kind of like, we were partying. I mean, she didn't win the primary, and we were partying, and we were making a fuss because we were the Women for Nikki, and that's what we did. We had a fun time. And we would hear them, and they would be like, they know they lost, right? And we'd be like, no, you don't get us. Like, this is a movement. It's like, we looked at it as like football, right? It's a game of inches.
Yeah.
We were making progress. It was momentum, and we were making momentum. We were looking to Super Tuesday. We were looking at how things were, we were moving forward. And forward progress was progress. And we were talking about the issues, and it was that grassroots, and it was all of those things. And there were a few reporters that got it and were talking to us about it, but a lot of them were like, no, these people don't get it. They're nuts. So yeah, I mean, I think that we did feel like we were just kind of misunderstood. And that was the thing. I mean, I think because they were looking at us compared to like the Trump campaign, which was this big behemoth. And here we were, this sort of grassroots group of people that were sort of, I guess, ragtag, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Joey.
Yeah.
So, bringing it back to something you had mentioned before, right? On like women voters, particularly being interested in, the issues of like the economy and kids' education and things outside of kind of the narrow way that the left will talk about women's issues, just being like abortion or something like that. What would you say would be the top three things, like the top three policy concrete things that the Republican Party, right, the Trump campaign, or a future Republican nominee could harp on or could focus on to really sway not just like the married women, which generally still typically go for Republicans, but say like single women or people who are women who are more skeptical of the GOP? What would be like the top three issues?
I think women that tend to lean in toward Republicans are genuinely more concerned with affordability issues, so the economy, national security. And when I look at it too, I really boil it down to the two issues of this campaign for the Republicans. I mean, in general, for everyone, but the two issues that the Republicans can really win on, and I think this is where women in particular are definitely looking to the Republicans to be strong. And I just bundle them right into these two: affordability and security. And affordability to me is the economy, it's inflation, and security is the border, it's national security, and it is all of the things that are happening: Ukraine, the Middle East, Russia, China, you name it. And so there's a lot of issues packed in there, right? I mean, that's like all of it. But though if you can answer those strong issues well, the Republicans will answer the mail for women. Now, that doesn't mean that women don't care about abortion, but it's just when you talk to women that are not just focused a single issue abortion, pro-life voters, they're going to prioritize those issues higher. And so I really think that, and again, I said early on, women are not a monolith. There are national security issue focused women. I mean, if you ask me what are my top priorities, I'm going to tell you I'm really concerned about national security. I'm really concerned about foreign policy. Those are where I put a lot of emphasis. I'm concerned about affordability, but I happen to be a lot more comfortable than someone else in a different scenario. I'm blessed. I acknowledge that. But, so I worry about different issues. That's where I prioritize. I worry about, those things. But that doesn't mean I don't want to hear about the affordability issues, that I don't care about those issues. It's just what I'm prioritizing. But I do, if we can hit those two issues hard, and if we can say these are why we have better solutions, those are going to resonate with women voters. I think about, the Women for Nikki is a great group of people to use as a focus group, truthfully. Because we had a gamut of women. We weren't just all a bunch of middle-aged Karens, to borrow from that jerk in Texas, decided to paint us all with one broad brush. We had single women that were, just starting out in their careers, all the way up to, women that were, empty nesters. That were getting close to retirement age, or that were farther along in their careers. We had young mothers. We had everybody across the gamut. That was the beautiful thing about, Women for Nikki, is that we had women in all different phases of life. And that was so cool because we had all those perspectives to draw on. I think that's the beautiful thing about Nikki Haley, is that she brings great people together. And and I'll say, Women for Nikki was not all women. We actually had some men in the Women for Nikki. We brought some great guys into it and had some great guys that were there. And by the way, Nikki Haley had some amazing affinity groups. There were students for Nikki. There were veterans for Nikki. And so for just my experience, there were other affinity groups that had, just an amazing experience as well. And just all of those great groups could tell similarly amazing stories. But yeah, I think for the Republicans, good, solid answers to those questions for women would mean a lot. And get some women out there telling those stories. Get some women surrogates out there, please.
With the time we have remaining, I have two quick questions for you. This is September, and so we're going to have the first of the presidential debates. What do you think each candidate has to do to kind of convince the people? And second question is, do you see a future for Haley should she run? Like, do you think she'll run again if Trump is a one-term president, right? Because he already served a term.
For the debates, I am very intrigued by what's going to happen with these debates, because now we're debating rules and redebating rules, or rediscussing rules, and will they have three and all these good things. But I think for this next debate, certainly we didn't have a real debate at the last one, so I'm looking forward to a real debate. I think this will be a very interesting one because we haven't seen Kamala Harris in the process yet. She did not participate in the primaries, so we haven't seen her show up yet. Trump can be a very good debater, but we have Kamala Harris, who was a prosecutor, so we have the potential of a very good debate. I think one of the things I'm concerned about from for her is that she hasn't done any interviews except for this one that we saw on CNN the other day. Highly edited. When she got to her policy portions, I didn't feel like she was very confident in those. When she was speaking about her family, her experiences, all those things, you could see she was very comfortable with that content. When she was speaking about policy, she just didn't seem as comfortable with that content. So unless she's getting a lot of practice, I'm not so sure. We'll see. She's great on prompter. She's great in speeches, but we'll see how she does when she gets there. I would like to see multiple debates because we did not see her in the primary, because she did not participate, in anything, in any interviews, in anything else. I think the American people deserve that. I don't think we need to have the I'm speaking moment with the microphones and all that other stuff. We don't need the t-shirts and the memes and all those other things. Let's just have straight up debates. Let's not play games at this point. So I'm looking forward to them. I hope we have multiples, and I hope they're good. That's what I'm hoping for. And I hope we don't have any more meltdowns at this point. We need them to be just effective and good. So that's that. And the future for Nikki Haley. I do believe there is a future. I would like to see her run again. One of the things that I think I'm very bullish on is that I do believe that there are good people in the Republican Party that are trying to be more unifying. And not, I look at a Governor Glenn Youngkin here in Virginia. I look at Governor Kemp. I look at Nikki Haley. I think Governor Cox in Utah. These are some great people in the party. Chris Sununu in New Hampshire at the governor level, but I also see in the House and the Senate, and I see some great people that are working within the party that are trying to be unifiers, that are trying to work across the different constituencies or the different factions of the party and bring people together and be that big tent. And I think that Nikki has the potential to do that. So life after MAGA that people talk about all the time.
Yes.
I believe that is going to be in the future of the party is in the unifiers, in the people that are going to bring that big tent. And I think that Nikki is going to be a part of that. And I hope that means that she runs. I hope that, we see her in the White House. I hope that I'm a part of that journey with her. My goal has always been to help her get there and make that journey with her. And I hope that's in 2028. I'm ready when she is. But yeah.
On my end, I hope we're in the kingdom by 2028, but that might be asking for too much. Joey, any last question before we close up?
My final question is just this. So it's November. The election's on November 5, I think.
Yeah.
Whatever it is. It's November 6, and two scenarios. Trump wins, or the second scenario, God forbid, we have Kamala Harris as president-elect. In both of those scenarios, what is step one for Republicans and conservatives going forward for the next 4 years?
Oh boy. Okay. November 6th. I think that on November 6th, regardless of outcome, well, let's just take that aside. Regardless of outcome, I hope that on November 6th, we all embrace a big tent forward mentality. And I think we need to. I think that we need to not be the winners and losers mentality of excluding people. I understand that there are people that have that do ugly things in online, and that there are trolls, and that there are people that we should not embolden, and I agree with that. But I think that there are people in the media that give the loudest microphones or they give the microphone to the loudest voices, and that those people are not the most representative. And I think that there's been people in the MAGA movement that have been labeled. But I think that realistically, and I hear this all the time, oh, we have to defeat MAGA. There are wonderful people in the MAGA movement, and they're our neighbors, they're our friends. I don't personally say I'm not MAGA. I consider myself a traditional Republican. I guess I'm more Reagan-esque. I consider myself a Haley Republican. But one of the things that I did not too long ago is that I realized, and maybe I'm going to show my age again. Here we go. A long time ago, I read a book by Stephen Covey.
Oh, yes. I've been there, done that.
Yes. And one of his 7 habits is seek first to understand, then to be understood. And I also am a big fan of Ted Lasso. That's a little less age defining. And I decided to be curious, not judgmental. And so I decided that it was time to start listening and to embrace some things. And I realized that I needed to just listen more and to stop being so judgmental. And I realized that, there's a lot of really great people around me that are MAGA. And that maybe, instead of constantly saying we have to defeat MAGA and take our party back, that we needed to realize that our party would be great. And people like Glenn Youngkin and, Governor Cox and, Governor Kemp, like they already get this. Nikki Haley already gets this. Our party is better when we bring those diverse opinions together. I look at what we've accomplished here in Virginia. We've accomplished a lot here in Virginia because we work together. And we've listened to people's concerns and we've addressed them and we've been better together. So all these people that are running around and saying defeat, defeat, defeat. First of all, we're never going to get anywhere. We're just going to be a minority party with a whole lot of principles. That's great. I don't like that idea. Or we're going to keep repeating the same process over and over again with no real answer. I keep talking about, okay, we got step 1, step 3, but we don't have step 2 figured out. No, let's get rid of the trolls. Let's not worry about them. Let's focus on the good people. Let's, recognize that we all have good things to bring together, and let's recognize that, let's not other people. Let's not say that, my neighbor Joe, who happens to believe in these MAGA principles, is not a bad guy. He's a good guy. He believes in some things that I might not necessarily agree with, but you know what? We do have some common ground. He believes in peace through strength. I believe in peace through strength. How we're going to get there, we're going to have to compromise on some things. He's going to have to give a little. I'm going to have to give a little. But guess what? Reagan and Tip O'Neill did the same thing. So, if they can do that, so can we. So I think on November 6th, it's time to let's put our swords down and start figuring out how we can start to live together and start to build back together. Because we're not going to move forward if we're going to keep fighting with each other. And truthfully, it's in the Democrats' best interests for us to keep fighting with each other. Because they would love for us to be a minority party.
Yep.
And they would love for us to keep infighting, because that's great for them. But that's not great for us.
Yep. As the saying goes, united we stand, divided we fall. A house divided
100%.
against itself cannot stand. Joey, any last comments from you before we close this up?
No, I think that's a great response. And I think it's important to remember there's a face behind a political opinion. And
Absolutely.
when I think of Trump's, well, first of all, I was one at one point. I've split from him. But when I think of Trump supporters, A, I think of my old self. B, I think of my family and friends, people that would give their shirt off their back for me. And so it's like, no, these people can't be my enemy. They're my friends, they're my family. And I think if we have that attitude that you've outlined, I think that there can be a bright future ahead for the Republican Party.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Alissa, for being with us. If people wanted to get in contact with you, what's the best way to communicate with you?
Find me on X.
Okay, and there it is, her handle right there, Alissa M. Baker. And so interact. If you have any, want to support Haley through any way, I'm pretty sure she can get you in contact. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. And until next time on the Gio and Joey Show, be blessed. Hang on for a bit. Don't leave.